Okay. Arriving in the platforms of Genesis, the line screen adaptation lines, of pre-order lines, prerequisites, location system, author attractions. For example, now, when you watch my videos, what do you see? What are you watching? Watching foundations, watching legacy, watching trinities, every location sending off the suppositions. True identity, right? Come in positions. Seeing general different timelines. Different clocking, different foundations. Glasses on, glasses off. Beard, no beard, all beard. Different kind of hair. Short hair, long hair. What we have to start identifying is our identities of our system, of our true foundations of our own source, records of time frame that puts process, communication, sending, and calculation, sending at 13 angles, process lines of 13 lines of supposition, operation lines of sequence, puts all communication system to its higher self. Now, when you watch my videos, you can see the transformation. That's Genesis alone, guys. That's its ancestry. That's its history in celestial. Okay? Come from all foundations of who we are. Now, identify everything locations which you aren't is the story itself. That's the clutter that operates the signals that puts all communications at confusion location system with attractions. Okay? So, what we all have to get in positions of is to understand how to see that in our calculation. All right? In some positions. All right, so we've done some line signals. Grand centers of surface and travel. So the one thing we have to get in positions of is how to balance out our identities of who we aren't. It's the stories of everything, okay? If somebody comes to you in positions, let's get attractions and location setting. Okay, that's you, and subtraction, all line connection, right? All right, so somebody's coming to you. All right, this, hey, how you doing? I'm doing fine, how are you? Now, is it done from the supposition here, or is it done from the mind line? Process in that position location is already done through its equation, so you're just observing everything that's already in set sequence. So the more you get into the film strip of the person in travel, process is communication system of the setting. You're just seeing it through window frames. Right, so you know exactly, hey, what's going on? You know exactly what they're going to say next. Because you're basically breaking down those barriers of who they are through their own identities, of their own foundations, of their own systems, seeing who they truly are through the ancestry and history of what they are through the celestial when it comes into the veils of location of masking. There's nothing to mask, there's nothing to veil. When you guys get position activation lines, it's done. You don't do anything. You just observe now. Nothing to do. There's nothing right, there's nothing wrong. Now, the more you let go, the more you start to identify. It's just come into the observation of film. You're filming everything that you already filmed in. So it's much easier to see that identification, isn't it? Rather than trying to understand what they're saying in that position. Because you're constantly creating stories. And you create those stories, it's overriding you already existing in that frame. But I want to make that very well clear how it comes in film strips of design. 3 centers of set tractions and directions. And operationalize the sequence. Okay, it's already set up, right? All this is set up. 3 platforms are already set up. Okay, this is already done. Set lines of travel. Okay, this is already done. And set lines of travel. Okay, sun's on operationalize the sequence. Travel communications all at once. Okay, everything has to be traveling. And you're in direct lines, you're right here in set position looking at the sun. Right? But it's inside you already and sending existing all at once, right? So you're looking at the sun, sun's looking at you. You're communicating back and forth. That's all you're doing, right? Talking to the sun. Your location grid comes in, adding frames and communication setting. Everything I'm setting up is not memory of anything, but memory of everything. Broadest lines, direct lines of ground, secure lines of panels, process, and positional casing calculations. Right? Travels through it all at once. All connects on all ones and settings or locations. The highest formation line condition setting is not to have story of anything. That is the mind of empty space. The void itself. The V-O-I-D, the void of space itself, interactions. The void itself. Okay? Staying in the void is all levels of the void. That doesn't override the system. You just exist in already in subpositional locations because there is no correlations of story. There's no right or wrong if you're already existing through Genesis. So if you get to truly understand how this all works, then you truly understand how to set up in the simulation through its system all through attractions. How you connect with the sun, and the sun connects with you. Okay? Through telepathy. Everything's done through telepathy. Operation lines are set in position all levels, sequence lines, ground set, location system, all through attractions. Travels through it again. Everything travels. So when I'm traveling, I'm just adding formations of just existing already and adding frames that keep going. Not stopping at any level. Not run, stop, run. Not execute, not platform, not positions, not offline, not line connections. Everything I say doesn't matter. You're just seeing it through observation. So you're looking at a window frame. You're looking at a high frame. You're looking at a low frame. You're looking at window frames. You're looking at frames, millimeters per frames, millimeters per seconds per frames, right? You're seeing everybody in a film strip. Okay? The more you let go, right? And then you start to identify these things. I already know what you're going to say. How is that possible? Did I do that or did I already know that? So the more you know, the more you are. The more you identify, the more what's happening. In that position, locations, calculation, setting, correlation system, all through attractions. Directing ground centers of surface gets you in that communications. So I recommend everybody watch my videos. Okay? Because when you watch my videos, you see you going through your own setting of your own foundations of who you are and who you aren't. Right? So adding lines of screens, that's all communication system, all through attractions, all looking through the sun. Right? Now, who says that this isn't real? It's not a photo. It's not its image. It's its own consciousness communicating. Two set lines of communication setting, two configuration setting, two provisional location line connection setting from me talking to the sun talking to me. It's a conversation. That's two set operations. Clocking centers a three-line provision. Only the sun in general. Okay? Nothing else. Nothing's coming into frame. Okay? Because I'm not adding frames. Because everything I'm looking at is just the film strip and observation. And the more you observe things, the more it gets easier how to see it through set positions and attractions. And then you bring it in set communications and settings all through operation. But it still travels. All at once. Okay? It's the most powerful thing. Is it a coincidence that general gives you this and gives you that? No. Right? But it's unexpected, right? So how can it be anything unexpected if you're already existing already through its expectancy of travel? Of travel. So I will not be able to do this if I keep adding stories. I will not be able to do this if I'm not understanding my system. I will not be able to do this until I let go of my clutter. I don't let go of my clutter, this doesn't travel. This doesn't travel. See, it's locked in. It doesn't travel. Because I'm adding emotion, I'm adding story, I'm getting technical. I'm blocking my system. It doesn't travel. But if you let it go, then it travels. See? Amazing. There's no clutter up here. And that's one thing you got to let go. Because I guarantee you, it does override your systems already existing already in platform. Not just that, but everything's expanding itself. Whoa. Next level in supposition of sequence. All through communications. All through travel. All through direction. Okay? Don't have anything in the mind but empty space. See everything, but know nothing, know everything. All right. Getting direct line centers, pyramid line, rotation lines, and set position all over the travel, platforms over lines, 3 centers of communication. So we'll start with that setting. Okay. Process and calculate lines in line screens. Process net location system, all 3 platforms and travel. There's 24 platforms you got to set up in tractions, right? I set position of 1/2, 6/8, 8/3, 3 centers of travel, directing line grounds into S projection. Okay. Sets coordinates and communications height line screen adaptation setting of traction. Okay, templates and tablets, 4 line signal location system and travel. Directing ground settings and line connection setting, height centers rotations, and crop circles and set design. Sequence lines, communication screen lines, adaptations of flux over setting. Okay, bring it in, simulation grounds. Okay, oh, wow, look at that, eh? All right, so we have the platforms, lines, center lines, the sequence lines, the clock line, communication lines, the 4 line signal location system, auto-calculate, modified, trial line, rotation line, condition setup, indication system of arrows. Indicate line screens, adaptations over lines, over cross line condition setting, arrows of indication setting, 4 lines of flux, center operation line screen, adaptation of traction. Working with inside line, outside travel. Interjecting lines, screen adaptation setting, calculations, X2000. Platform over E factors, process lines indicates system, all 3 settings, crop circles, code weaving, code activation, screen location, and setting traction locations. Bring it in, outside line, inside travel. Okay? And you see it line communications, all through travel. Watch, it travels on its own. Oh yeah. So the more you get a story, the more you see the frame communication going forward. So you can see it. So you can see it moving. You can see it on standby. And all set positions, all operation signals, implication system calculations. All different angles of flux. Okay? Okay, flux over grounds, course centers, lines, calculation lines, 3 scales, communication system, all through travel. Travel, 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 travel. Okay? So, empty mind is an empty space of a mind. Process of communication setting. Stops position locations, all lulls. Stop creating stories in the mind. Travel, 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 travel. Okay? Inside rotation. All right? Look at how powerful that is. Whoa, ho, 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 ho. All right, we color the ground line centers, the sequence, process lines of indicates the system, and ground set position of this void itself. Online, outline, sequence location of 2 panels. Process line, outline, signal locations in 1 center, service location system calculations. Indicate lines, flux over line, indirect lines, and set positions, operations, set sequence, locations, and travel. Travel, 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 travel. All right. See from outside, inside line connection. Okay. And we get position lines of red, inside line, outside tractions, inside provision, outside location. Okay, so we platform the E factors over line, green centers of travel, 3 centers of communication, 1 centers of communication setting calculations. And then we go into line centers, course and channels, operation line sequence, panel screens, 3 centers of travel, outline signals, location system of travel. Okay, setting communication inside rotations, and travel record time frame. Okay, now we work with the inside lines, inside communications. Okay, platforms walk in the sequence, indicate 3 centers of grounds and communication. Operation lines, outside line, vortex over cross line angles, and screen location system and traction. Inside line condition setting and position. All right? So it's amazing when you bring everything in set position. Everything in, guys. Simulation of grounds. Over cross lines, signal lines and communication of surface. Platforms lines, change course centers of time frame, location setting of travel. See? From there to there, from there. Travel locations. 4 angles and flux over lines and screen adaptations and attractions. Oh, look at that. Right? It's more fun when you just see it through fun. Okay? Spectrum over lights, spectrum over division, location setting attractions. Modify the ground lines orange. Change formation lines of setting sequence. Ground centers set position. Setting up the simulation system all through light, shades, and shadows, guys. Inside line condition setting travel. Right? Outside signals, and location grounds, and high line sequence location. All through setting, all through operation. Okay. Okay, so symbolism lines of centers, process course centers and calculation setting of screens, directing lines and position location setting. Your 24 lines of windows. Now the frame course centers, process lines of 3 angles and travel, 3 set line course centers of communications of configuration system. Process indicates lines in set 1 center, 1 traction, 1 location. Okay. Pyramid activation lines, screen adaptation of settings. Okay. Indicate lines circulation, 1 rotation line service and travel. Operation line grounds time calculation. Okay. High centers, high process, line condition setting. All right. Indicate, calculate, modify, center line operation line sequence, set course circulation, rotation lines and setting. Comes in orbiting communication setting, detection screen location system, and traction. Travel. Right? Inside rotation. All right? Inside calculation setting. Okay? Directing lines of link, process lines of indication system. So every time I'm drawing something, I'm not overriding because I'm not existing. Okay? Because I'm not here or there. I'm just the conscious of everything in mind imagination that has no formations, no space, no time, no provision, no cycles, no calculations, just the mind itself. So there's nothing projected in my mind, okay, until I bring it in through consciousness. You got to modify your system of super consciousness, and how to identify that is through your conscience. Conscience, controlling your conscience of what you're bringing in and how you're bringing things in through interpretations. How you see that in a situation. Everything you bring in is a story. Okay, but it's how you engage of the story. Okay, as you see things in seconds, minutes, and hours, and frames. That's all you got to see. Is just see the observation that's already done through its equation, so you don't get emotional, guys, because it's a film strip that's already done. Okay, and the more you observe, the more you get in position, the more you come to the mind of empty space. The quiet the mind, the quiet the soul. The calming system puts every location system at balance. But the process that you're always in the positions of what? The void itself, the space itself, that has no foundation setting, but just keeps going through the location system, all through tractions, all through locations, all through communication setting, all of operation lines and item position location system of the calculation. And travels, indirect lines, communication inside traction. Okay? All right. Now understand your primers and your primers. High lines is setting the location system, all through traction location setting. Now calculate and modify. Okay, so we have 24 lines setting the sequence. This can position of 24 center travels. Equals lines into Y screens, 3 centers of 6 over lines of 9 in position of 12 and set tractions. Okay, now set lines of triangulation, process lines and Fibonacci, process line triangulation in process locations. So it's going to get more complicated when you come into the high center line condition setting of tillers, process lines of 3 lines of measure and 4 lines of scale. Process indication setting of grounds and high line sequence into hieroglyphics. Now, according to the time frame line position lines of 2 measure over scale, 2 lines of track centers, 4 line signals is the process communicates the setting and configures the system, all through portal communication setting and calculation. Okay, so it's going to get more complicated now through your platforms. So you got 24 lines of propellers and a film strip, the design line and screen adaptation to its system all through travel. Okay, coming in position, all platforms set lines of sequence in position lines as flywheel that processes communication setting, 8 set lines of rotations and traffic communications. Getting grounds of that is platforms over center, platforms over sequence, and platforms over 0 in rotation. Calculating ground centers, online sequence of platforms over screen lines, adaptations of flux. Okay, 3 set line sequence and location setting a panel, process indication system multi-travel, part acceleration system and settings, linking screens, adaptation lines into 0, 1, set course centers, the activated line course centers, line condition upper design units, location 0.1, That comes into its own division locations out of calculation settings in set position locations, higher levels of the mapping line, set location setting in the coordination system, out to the atomic levels, into high communication system, into your mapping sequence. To your own architect and location, your own design lines, and your own line division location system, all through conception. The mind interpretation system sets lines of travel. 3 grounds of surface and set rotation. And set calculations. Okay? Inside rotation in center. In set positions. All through tractions. Okay? Understand everything in set rotation. Okay? Okay, so we line center lines, inside lines are red lines. Process lines indicate centers, highways, and 3 centers of 4 travel communications. Directing line lengths over cross line condition setting and flux over line rotations. Travel point lines of graph inside outside line condition system of travel. Okay, now we have to understand how to modify the highways. That modifies the ground centers in the mapping sequence of 3 centers, 4 centers of travel, direct lines of link and process communication. Crossing angles in a crossword location setting and calculations. Right? Bring it in the map. Okay? All through setting, all through set tractions, locations. Okay? As we come in that positions, we modify the ground centers, the sequence. The set traction. Okay? Travels lines, point lines of purple over lines. Process line indicates the system. All through green. Overriding green lines in conceptual setting and travel communication high centers. Inside rotations, inside calculation setting. Right? Bring it in, bring it in, bring it in. All right. Then we set up highway lines, over lines of black over sequence, blacks over channel, blacks operation line sequence location setting and calculations. Online centers, online travel, in that communications high centers, process calculation setting and screens. Sets position of 1, 2, and 3 lines of 4 set travel. Okay? Crossing angles, crossing angles, crossing angles through flux. Inside rotations and travel in communication graphs. Simulation lines of roads and screen adaptation. Inside rotation centers, process indicates the system, all through setting. All through triangulation, all through flux. Okay? Traffic runways, process lines indicates set is over red. And set lines of 2 reds and 3 reds at communication setting and calculations. Travel. Calculating line centers into gold frames and direct lines of ground communication system and traction locations. And set line, not line center, and line communication triangulations flux. Okay? Very powerful stuff. Okay? Okay, but getting into that platform is to understand how to set up a mapping sequence location of 3 platforms of grounds, powers, and atmospheres, and process communication setting and line communication setting to hieroglyphics. So there's always ways of looking at these things, and you have to really start to identify how to modify this all levels in position of 4 lines of sequence, okay, in position of flux and direct signals. Now we get into the position lines of void. Okay, view on line centers. Let's get into high course centers, lines of travels, Y screen. So if you understand the void itself, then you understand the existing of view itself, just the void. The void is the volume, the mass, the velocity, the vacuum, line course centers, line condition setting, and accelerates location to its operation, to its intelligence, and directions. Okay, in that communication system, all through your pyramids and travel. Okay, process that indication 4 centers of angles and travel communications. 1 signal travels 3 grounds and 4 set in sequence. Process indication lines high centers and rotation surface of travel. And set position its operation lines and travel communications. Okay. So start to recognize how to modify your system to traffic inventories, the process of communication road graphs, and screen adaptations of flux and set travel. Okay, to set position, right? Calculation lines, set tractions, set position operation, to your set locations what? Your connection system, all through travel. Your satellite. Process indication setting the grounds and high lines of sequence. Okay? All right. So let's get into 24 lines of filming. Okay, so you got 3 lines of tether, 3 centers of travel, 6 lines of measure, 9 lines of scale, 12 lines of calculation setting. Okay, on 4-line sequence, 4 grounds of surface. Okay, so we process the A tracks that overrides B lines and lines of C, line connections of E, factors over D. X1 frame, process lines of indications over cross, overline sequence, set position of 0, process lines of 0.1 and travel. What I'm doing right now is I'm setting schematics lines of a primer circuit that process communicates to its binary. It's all communication setting as productions. Calculation lines of A, B, C equals E. A equals lines, E lines of D. D factors over 1. We do 1/2 pipe over 1 over 6, 1/8, 1/12 into 24 line signals into 2,400,000 line condition setting of seconds, minutes, and miles in traffic communications. All right, bringing it through its equation, solve calculation. Okay, it's really interesting when you look at that in the equation. Okay, so I'm just showing you exactly how this comes in opposition to your setting subtractions. How it converts the system lines of frame, right? Cloud line, we come into the center cloud. There's the cloud and communication setting to the surface. Okay, booyah. Now, think of the cloud itself in the center operation of its highway. Okay, now it modifies the string lines into its seed pods. Direct line outside signals location setting this its conversion system, all the cerebral cortex. Line signals and lines location near lines, neuropathogens, the neural networks, the line signal location system, the line conversion system, the line linking line conditions interactions, interdimensional line condition system, all through travel. Very powerful stuff. All through the brain communications convergence. Booyah. All right. Center point lines of graph is a clocking system, one center operation lines of sequence that rotates the system line condition set a time reactor that clocks this location setting and all line course centers of communication. Okay, bringing it in all position off channel. Very powerful stuff, guys. All right, so we had platforms over lines. Now we get 24 sequence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 platforms of travel. Those are the 12 platforms, right? Now we equalize the course centers that communication lines of setting through open sequence. Process indication lines, high line ground centers. So it indicates outside line signals in 3 centers of measure and scale. Okay, process lines and the line centers to 3 lines of scale. That's that traffic communications. All right, and then we direct the panels, process of indication system, all through travel. Okay, it's very powerful. Change line grounds, high sequence location setting, and position to its space arc. All right, so the arc comes in line signals, location of its ground, calculate and modify. Center lines, operation line sequence, outline, rotation, surface, and travel. Okay, in constellations. Is that communication? Directing ground centers of service, opposite location setting, and communication setting calculation. All right. And then we cross line centers, cross line center location system, all through travel. Okay, very powerful stuff. Inside rotation. Okay, look at that. Okay. All right, working with that inside lines and all different angles and flux. All right, there we go. All right, so that's the platforms in there in sequence. Okay, center core centers. All right, so we have center op. Okay, so it's like a snow globe, which you have to stand provisions and centrations. Directing line centers, operation line sequence into its energetic dome. Okay, and then you cross line, inline rotations, and set position. Okay. Open panels, open sequence, open communication setting calculation. Okay. All right. Get you a true stand how to get in that position. Right, how to see an all information setting grounds. Split lines and anomaly 3 centers in process calculation. Crossing angles of platforms over cross line, 1 signal over traction. Then we take the timeline centers in rotation setting and travel communications. Then we direct the panels, process over 3, 6, 9 line centers of channel operation. Okay, and then we walk inside rotations and ground set lines of surface. Okay. In that rotation line set lines, process communicates settings at all different angles of platforms of travel. Look at that. Mine switching lines and alteration lines and grounds, high centers communicate inside rotation. Okay. All right, so we color the line centers and rotations of platforms of 1 over sector, vector, and 1 quad screen. 3 centers lines of travel, direct lines on link, process lines indicates ascending mapping sequence, mapping pi. 3 centers of travel, 4 set calculations, 5, 6, 8, and 12 in subpositions. Cross angles, 45 angle line, rotation, service, and travel. Okay. Setting communication line, indirect lines, and line connection system, all through set operation. Okay. Then we come into the platforms of travel. Okay. And the observation comes in set positions. You're here in tractions. You like what you're seeing, you move on in sequence. Okay. But first you're going to set up the center line, cross lines, indirect lines, course centers of communication. Then you're going to change frame line centers and rotation setting and sight lines of communication. Pathogens and collagens and rotation lines in all communicates setting traffic location. Indicates high centers and rotation surface and travel. Okay, outside lines, inside rotation. Okay, and that's what it looks like in platform communication. Being on that platform is setting. It's going to get more complicated now. How you set up everything inside lines through space arc. All right, so provisional lines of set lines comes in this set lines of travel. 3 lines of oranges. Set lines, I line centers, I sequence location system, calculation system. Set course centers, lines of travel, and direct lines of link. Okay. In that process, in that line rotation, you change it in that communication setting and conversion. Okay. So we work with the above system in position of blue plasma, outline setting. Travel point lines of graph, platforms over lines, over line cross line condition setting, and platforms over screen location. Okay. And then we bring the wall sequence in panels operation of 45 angles in travel. Okay. Inside rotations and travel communications. Okay. Indirections of window frame traction. Face recognition. Face recognition, see? So travel communications setting calculations. Of the center operation. Okay. See the face? All right, so we get line signals of pyramid activation line, rotation spin cycles that travels communication. All right, so we have walking line centers. It gets complicated now, doesn't it? Simulation grounds communicates offline, inside, outside rotation. Okay, panels operation line settings, and set sequence in communications, inside travel. Okay, all through setting, all through operation. Okay. So remember I was telling you about working from outside in and outside line centers, location system all through platforms and traction is direct lines and link. But if you look really close, you can see your Earth. There's your Earth. Behind the wall line sequence of plasma, see? There's your Earth right there. All right. Now we just bring your Earth in and set lines of sequence, pixelation grounds. Inside outline setting and simulation ground communication observation systems all through set positions. See coming in form? There's your Earth right there. Right there. Right? All right, so we go on the pixelation grounds of communications. We center up the system. Center sequence the pin outlines pixelation grounds of graphing. Inside rotation. And trap calculations. Setting sequence location. Your Earth. Okay, there's your Earth. Inside. Isn't that wild? Earth inside the cell of the space arc. All right. Working with the stutter ops line centers rotates the system location of travel. That comes into gravitation locks into planetations in set positions. Okay. Seeing the full Earth rotation line center contractions. Okay. Now we blow in the blue lines, process lines and signals. All through calculation. But it's amazing how you come in this provisions, guys, off the tractions. Okay? Measure Earth. How close? Booyah. But how it's centralized, it's all lines of all communication system, all through setting. All right? All through pixelation, all through hologram. Okay? All right, I know it's complicated. It's getting more complicated now, but you're starting to recognize how this is all worked now in set positions. Okay, so now we go into the window lines, frame line, course centers, inline screen adaptations of cross angles. Set communications setting grounds, high lines, crossing overline screens, and location system all through travel. Okay, and then we cross the angles and set communications. Okay? Okay, set in the platforms and travel. Okay, and then cross up into a pyramid set line. Here's the pyramid set line, and here's the pyramid set line here. So we equalize the course centers, 2 factors over line rotation. Okay? Setting up the panels to streamline adaptations of surface and travel. The platforms, each one in set traction. Okay, each platform is its own construction zone. That's modified the system to its own construct and line communications. All right? Directing grounds and high lines of sequence. Okay? Okay, so it's kind of like looking outside its Earth, guys. Inside the space of its arc. Very powerful stuff in trial. You know, it's next level for you guys to identify. All through operation. Okay? All right, as those 24 platforms are set up now, through the simulation of its construct, coming into the line condition setting into all set positions, its operations in the line sequence in locations. All right? Directing your highways. Now we go to the highway lines. We're going to cross the line screens and set lines of communication. All right, so we need an A track. Now the A track sets lines of calculation setting streamlines. So we have 3 angles in process calculation. And then we have 4 angles in track communication. Okay, then we outline the signals into a modification of its window and frame communication. Right? Online centers, triangulation 1. And then we get in platforms over cross line condition setting to 2 over track location. Dimensional solar sail. 3 signals of grounds, 4 lines of settings, 4 communication lines of travel. Okay. Then we go through the grid lines and screen adaptations of flux over setting. Process indication system in line centers and rotation surface of tractions. All through traction. All right. Grid workers come in line settings, rotates the system, all through structures, all through platforms of simulation. Okay. All through Earth and travel. Okay. Into the calculation setting of the space of its arc. Okay. All right. So I'm just showing you how this is all set up in set positions. Working in ground sequence in 35 angles, 45 flux over line screen adaptation. All right, working with the city lines, rotates lines of towns, inline rotation service and travel, direct lines of coordinates into set location system calculation. Okay, inside line settings and track location. Okay. All right, but it's very powerful when you see its identification. Process in the Earth line It's processing the directness and line centers in rotation, surface, and travel. But you have to stand inside rotation now through this platform's 24 filming. Okay, 24 filming inside line conditions. All through platforms, all through structure, all through design. Okay? And once we understand that, then we come in positions of the simulation grounds. Okay, on standby, see? Be on standby and set positions. 2 ID visual lines, set lines, the sequence. Set position here, and set position over here, over cross location. Okay, outside lines, signal lines, and rotation surface, and translucent patterns, and rotation surface and travel. Okay, outside setting, process lines into high positions. There's your energetic dome and sequence. Illumination graphs and set lines of travel. Okay, that's one platform. Okay, so we said curvature lines of space-time line centers. Process indicates the setting of flux over 3 centers of travel, direct lines of link. That indicates the platforms over line centers over cross-location setting into magnetic force of galaxy shift lines of anomaly. So it travels and communicates the system off the surface. Okay, direct lines and line centers in rotation setting to its simulation grounds, and rotation set track lines to its AVR system. Okay, it's platforms, see? Laser communication lines of grounds. Okay, so we cross the angles, set up new line core centers to calculate the setting, road graph screens over cross and condition screens. 3 centers of travel and 4 lines of flux. Now it indicates clocking lines of 0, process lines of 0.1 of direction. In outside line settings, there we go, in sequence of panel operation. Okay? So you got the earth line and circulation setting attraction. All right? Okay, so we go through time sequence, 3 centers of scale. Indicates ground centers and portals of communication. Okay, directing lines link. And that communicates offline center inside rotation surface attraction. Okay. So many ways to look at this in rotation lines and travel. Right? Very powerful stuff, isn't it? Pretty amazing. All right, so that's done. I'll be setting all through operation. Okay? It's all done. All right, now we go through the out centers in position of void lines. This grid coming in line centers and travel, directing lines of 4 clocking lines of zeros. It indicates 4 settings of signals. In coordinates over screen. 4 centers of time patterns and travel. Cross and angles, inline screen adaptations of highways and travel communications. 3 central lines. Planetary line centers, rotation surface. Cross communication lines over 1, crossover 2. Set lines of 3 and travel. Okay, we change time frame again. And rotation lines of surface and traction. All right. X8000 comes in, moderates the system lines of angles. 3 centers and position of ground centers of surface and travel. Okay. Scan centers of 1 setting, operation line sequence and panels of operation screen location of center communication. Directing ground centers, 1 centers of flux over line screen adaptation, 2 lines of measure and scale of communication. Directing ground centers of service, 1 operation line sequence, panels, screens, surface, location of center. Okay, and set directions. All 3 directions in the simulation grounds of communication. Okay. So the higher you go, the more you come into the cloak and dagger, guys. The more you come out of sequence, out of bound, out of communications. The highest information system is where you identify how to go through mapping line centers of travel. Okay, and coordinate the platforms. Setting lines, crossing angles, setting flux over lines and adaptation system, all through its mapping system, lines of travel. Crossing angles and operation system of ground lines and set lines of sequence. Okay, and location of travel. Okay, in set position. Okay. Bring it in sequence. Now you can set up a highway lines, 45 line angles. Okay, setting up new tethers, new attachment centers in 3 lines or 4 lines of highways, and communicates to its primer that one signals its operation sequence. Panel windows, operation lines of windows itself, and travel 3 lines. Height centers and graphics, line course centers, line communication lines, and height, position, location, measure, and scale. Process indication system, map and sequence, mapping through pi. Very powerful stuff when you come into that positions. Oh, so we offline centers, 3 travels of point graph communication. Then we come to this position. This position's all through clock and centers of 0 gravity correlation. Very powerful stuff through a mapping center line communication. Okay. Directing lines and link in platforms, and directing angles in simulation grounds. Simulation grounds, attractions. Okay, highline signals, location, all set lines of surface and travel. Okay, but I'm just showing you all ways to get in position on the map and center, how to process every location system and track locations when it comes into your teleportation. Okay, creating things within the teleportation setting of its vessel itself. All the central line condition setting to your Earth and rotation. Okay, into your simulation grounds and set positions, all through platforms and travel. Okay. I know it's a lot to take in. Okay. Crossing angles at 0 lines of sequence, process indication system. So let's get in track lines of 0, 1. Okay, activators lines, equals lines, activators lines, screen adaptations of flux over lines, 1 line screen location. And then we have 0.1, which is location lines into 24 sequence. Set calculation lines, high position lines, equal lines, and high position of question over lines, and mark over screen. 2 platforms over line centers, says overline sequence location over pi. Window frames, process lines of indication setting, 4 lines of flux over 3 over 0, and set position of point lines of 1, 1 over lines, 0 point lines of 1, set position 1, 1, 1, 0 lines, process and platforms, and travels in 4 grounds of communication. All right, there's your pyramid and travel communication. All right, so across the angles, split lines of anomaly, process lines, and platforms over line, rotation inside travel. Okay, so the pyramid's inside line now. Okay, so the more we come into the calculus setting to echo chambers, flux over lines, process lines of communication setting, the platforms of communication system converts to the system, lines of space, lines of anomaly. Okay, static graph screens, adaptation settings over cross location system in travel. Okay, very complicated stuff. All right, so we have 45 line centers, opposite direct signals, and location over cross line angles, and all that communication system all through travel. Okay, coming to gridlocks, into simulation ground centers and travel communication. Over cross line angles, platforms over 1, process over 2, process over 3, and process over 6. And some travel communications. Okay. IC 1000 comes into platforms, direct lines of 1 signal, and set travel. And then we set position lines over line sequence, over cross line angles, and position over line sequence lines of travel, and set traction in locations. Okay, in directions, in set line condition. Okay? So there's always ways to make platforms, guys, in set positions, all through operation. Start to see more love with your simulation. All through grounds, all through highways and travel. Okay? And it's always connected high centers and line communicates to its position of its pyramid. Remember, we've gotten the ground centers of surface location setting to travel from 1 position here, 2 positions here, 3 positions here, and 4 positions here. Right? Well, that's exactly how to come inside line condition, all through traction. Okay? And how to expand outside a rotation setting of its void itself. So come into expanding here, come into expanding here, come into expanding here, come into expanding here, and set it. Okay? That process going forward, guys, with no story frame. So you're adding frames and moving forward to new frames of travel. Okay, if not, you're still stuck in the center trying to stay in you through operation. You're still stuck in the center instead of operations. In any way and form that you see in travel. Okay? So, very powerful when you come in that position, location through a cycle, all through that position. It's amazing, isn't it? When you see it through travel, inside positions. Everything that you've done through its equation, all through calculation. Okay? And all through platform. So, what we have to start identifying is just the basic how to see ourselves without seeing ourselves of story. The stories have to dissolve. And when it dissolves, the body dissolves. And when the body dissolves, the mind dissolves. And when the mind dissolves, the space dissolves. And when the space dissolves, there's nothing there. Just empty space. So your provision lines is just the void itself. Just the void. Because you're all levels of empty space. Seen on four corners of sequence lines of pi. Right? Empty, 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 empty. Mass is everything of emptiness. Empty equals emptiness. Complete emptiness. Nothing in the mind itself. Nothing in projection of the mind itself. Nothing perceiving anything consciousness of its mind itself. In that positions. It's amazing when you let everything go, of which you can come into all levels of just creating in set position to its operation. How you see that in all information setting, to its simulation grounds and travel. Okay? To its operation system. Okay? Just empty space itself, guys. But it's amazing what you can come into through all levels of drawing. Just drawing. Constantly drawing, but observing everything. Drawing, observing. Right? So what you're drawing, you're just observing. So in that position comes into all levels of creation and creating at the same time. Taking you out of direct, taking you out of indirect. Just processing you in the center operation of you. That's you in the past, present, and future all at once. That's you in expanding outside line communications, just all levels of the mind of empty space up by itself. Right? So, what you live in the void, you become the void, you are the void, I am the void. And that process is how you start to see things in location setting. When it comes to the pre-order, you have 13 line centers and position simulation centers, processing communication lines, the foundation, how it comes into the actual symbiote to its intelligence of moderation, into the mind alteration setting, okay, interactions, how we identify that in sequence, how we identify that in line communication system, how we see that through observations, through frames by frames by frames by seconds, minutes, and hours, right? You have to come into your own calculus in timeline centers, how you see yourself in division, how you see yourself in plus, how you see yourself in negative, how you basically see yourself in O positive, O center, O traction, O division, O locations, L calculate and modify, all line calculations heading to travel, right? 3 signals of grounds, online sequence, operation signals, location sending, and 3 grounds communication off surface, right? Connecting ground centers into constellation system off the traction. Phase direction and time frame changes all communications, right? So I'm constantly just creating. I'm not overriding anything because you're already existing already. So once you stop creating frames of stories, you just become the void itself of all operation system, all through tractions. Okay, all through location. Just constantly creating. Just stay in observations all the time. Because there's nothing to do. It's all done by equation. So the more you draw, the more you center off, and the more you come in that position to its operation circuit and know exactly what you're doing in provisions of drawing sequence in line condition setting in travel. Okay, in position inside line conditions, in rotations. inside travel, inside line, in communication. Right? So you're waking up every morning to the void, which is the void of you, which is the symbiote of you, the intelligence of you, the mind alteration of the state that you're in that position, right? So if you're here on your earth, okay, you're here in your earth line settings, right? So you're just moving forward now. You're just moving forward because you're just observing everything around you. 3 seconds of angles. You're just observing, right? But you're moving forward. You're not stopping in the center. Because what you're doing is you're creating anomalies and you're going to lower divisions of platforms. So from this to this. And now you're living the low spectrums of light in provision lines of spectrum in location to its Earth. You're living the lower lines of Earth. In position of ground lines, the sequence of its Earth setting of its operation of 144 to the outline signal location in outer space, puts every line in void, puts process communication lines in figure 8 and rotation surface interactions in rotation setting. The balance of the Earth is the balance of space. Space itself is its void, but the void is its voidless, timeless and shapeless and motionless. Okay? But the Earth itself, okay, is the balance of everything. So space, okay, equals Earth. Okay, space equals the Earth. That's a platitude of you existence. Spaceless, okay, is lines of timeless, okay, which is the void. You are existing and everything happening all at once, all through traction. So spaceless is a continuous force. Space is a connection force. So the continuous force, you put space together, which is the Earth line of 1. Void is the 0 line of 1. And the process of spaceless is the operation of operation setting existing all at once, all of 1. Right? Which is the mind itself. The mind itself is the mind altered state where you see everything in position, how you see things in perspective, right? How you see things in tractions, how you see things in locations, how you see things in formula, how you see things in equation, how you see 3 different angles, right? You see it, you're engaging, right? But you don't bring it in because it brings you in box center. Now you're attached to its emotional setting through its box frame. Now you're in conversion of its clocking system of foundations. Now it's affecting you in your infinity 8 rotation. Now it's creating cosmic, plasmic location sending a travel, a conversion of mind alteration state that change the platforms and set lines of sequence in all communication system all through surface. Okay, so stop creating stories and just stay in observation. Hooah. That's a lot of conflict with yourselves in positional processing. Sending lines in the operation line sequence foundations of the symbiote to the intelligence of mind altered state of its system. Set lines of calculation setting and travels into high center communication system and travel communication line centers into its genesis. 13 civilizations. Okay, so I gave you guys a lot to get in positions of. I know exactly how to get into that position locations, how everything comes in line position location is just to observe everything more and more, because your body's just becoming more of itself now, of what it isn't and what it never was is what it always is. Its genesis of itself, its own foundation of 13, way it sees itself in its own ancestry history and its celestial through its foundations. Living the VR into the 7 cities, guys. Living the actual VR itself is the operation of its just existing in systems. When you get out of story of everything, you're just existing of the void of nothing. There's nothing to perceive because all you're doing is observing everything that's in its own consciousness. And that's what we have to start to identify. How to get in that position is to control it all levels of emotional setting of your conscience. How you see that through adaptations, how you see that in life force, how you see that in the life game that you guys are. Okay? Not what you're in. You're already there. You're not in this, you're not in that, because you're already existing in the simulation. Okay? So Putting yourself in that position puts every locations of balance and travel. Oh yeah. All right. That's it. Hope you guys enjoyed that. See you in 5.